Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Fuhrman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. In the pantheon of the feminine divine, there are several goddesses depicted holding ornate and bejeweled mirrors. What do they see when they gaze into those mirrors? Moreover, what would human women see if they gazed into mirrors and in the reflection they saw themselves as goddesses? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway, has been on the path of the feminine divine and women's empowerment for more than 25 years. She's the author of more than 25 books on the subject, has presented at international goddess conferences, is an accomplished journalist, and sought-after interfaith wedding officiant. Her website is revlauriesue.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and latest book, Goddess in the Mirror. Please join me in welcoming back to Vox Novus, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway. Welcome back, Laurie.
Well, thank you for having me.
Laurie, for our listeners meeting you for the first time, please share your path and how it led to your interest in the feminine divine.
Well, when I was a journalist in the 90s, I went through a very deeply transitional time when my father passed away, and I lost a job on a magazine as an editor-in-chief because it was falling apart. And I started searching for something spiritual and something different than the life I had been leading. And I'd always been a spiritual person, but I wasn't quite sure how to focus it. And somebody sent me a deck of cards called the Goddess Oracle. And I just fell in love with the goddesses in this deck. And I started to learn more about them and found my own way to the goddess path.
And tell us a little bit about Lakshmi.
Lakshmi came to me when I was in seminary in a moment of crisis. I was sitting in the bathroom making smoke rings with incense because I was taught in seminary school that our prayers go up to the gods on the smoke, and that's why we use incense and candles and smoke in ceremonies. And I was praying for some financial relief because I had tuition due for seminary, and Alexander was a little boy and he had a lot of health issues, my son. And I just wasn't sure how I could sort of guide us out of this time period, moving from being a full-time journalist into becoming a minister. And I started praying, and I saw this vision of this beautiful Indian woman in my mind's eye. And she said, "Build a shrine to me." And I could still hear it clear as day. And I really didn't know what she was talking about. And I've spent the last 25 years trying to build that shrine physically, metaphorically, spiritually, and in books.
And you've written a few books about Lakshmi. How many total?
There are actually 5 books now in the Everybody Loves Lakshmi collection. It's Lakshmi Magic, a Lakshmi. That's her sister, who is the goddess of poor fortune or bad fortune. And there's a new book coming out in the fall called Lakshmi Devotional. And there's also a Lakshmi Wealth Journal and a Lakshmi Notebook that each have their own sets of prayers and different ways that people can connect with her.
And you've written more than 25 books.
Yes, I have. I really have lost count, but I am of the philosophy that if I have something to say now, I put it in a book, because after 40 years of being a journalist, and at least 20 of those being an online editor and journalist writer, and, writing hundreds, thousands of articles over time. After all those years of writing and articles being online, they started to be taken off, and magazines started to fold, and websites had redirected links. And I realized that my entire body of work had shriveled down to next to nothing. And of course, I was writing more about psychology, mental health, emotional health, sexual health. So I just decided to step onto a path of putting all my older books back, my backlist books back into print, and also writing a bunch of new ones on topics that were dear to my heart.
And you started your own publishing company.
Yes, I did. That was one of the one of the gifts of the pandemic. I just decided to just formalize what I was doing in a small publishing company so that it was just a container for the books that I wanted to write and other books that I may publish down the line.
And that container is called?
It's called Goddess Communications.
Wonderful. Now, you've written a plethora of books covering a wide range of topics with the emphasis on empowering women. Why did this topic appeal to you?
Well, because as much as I may look differently to the world, I have been a disempowered woman for much of my life. I grew up with a very critical mom, and I came from a home that was really torn apart when my father abandoned us. And I came from an alcoholic home where my father was drinking and my mother was hiding it. And something that I don't discuss a lot publicly is I was also in an abusive relationship where I got hit a few times and went through that whole experience of being in an abusive relationship and not knowing how to get out. A lot of my evolution as a writer has come with my evolution as a woman, as I've tried to share content that really has helped me in my own spiritual path. And, some people are very successful and accomplished and they look good on social media, but there are secrets and shadows that plague us. And I think one of the things that I love about the path of the goddess is that we embrace it all. It's not just you have to be so cool and perfect and get everything done. It's you have to sit down and cry. You have to take a moment to just feel your pain. You have to bear witness to other people's pain without trying to tell them what to do. And you can be in the same space of sadness and happiness at the same time.
Of all the goddesses that you were called to study and resonate with, which ones beside Lakshmi made the greatest impression upon you?
Well, I don't want anyone to get jealous, so I don't like to name names, but I will tell you because the goddess is the goddess is the goddess, and she exists in so many forms by so many names. And I know so many people in the goddess community who call her by a particular name, but also experience her as a global, energetic Mother Nature, Mother Earth, the universe, the great Shakti, and the universal force of our planet and beyond. So it's hard to kind of say I have this one that I like best or that one that I like best, but there are certain goddesses that I work with.
For those who don't know, I had the blessing of meeting Laurie Sue through the seminary that we both attended. I was graduating while she was starting, and we came together a couple of years later and have been in a wonderful, blessed relationship ever since. And our home is a literal temple of virtually every goddess image that you can think of. We have Isis, we have Lakshmi in numerous iterations, and we have many, many others. And I feel very blessed to reside with the goddess that I married, Laurie Sue Brockway, and all of the other goddesses that she's brought to reside with us. So thank you for that, darling.
Thank you. I know that you were wooing me with goddess statues at the beginning of our courtship and taking me to Lakshmi pujas, and it was really the right exact way to get our relationship started.
Absolutely.
But I do want to just respond to, I think you were asking me about other goddesses that I work with. I do work with Shashat because Shashat is the goddess of writing, and she is the goddess of measurement. She's the goddess of scribes and libraries and books in the Egyptian pantheon. And she's somebody that started calling to me more recently. And I've written 3 books on her so far. I have a 4th one coming out. I just think she's a wonderful, wonderful goddess to help anybody who wants to write books or to embrace the energy of spiritual literature, the importance of books. She's just wonderful.
Before we talk about your latest book called Goddess in the Mirror, I just want to say that when Laurie Sue and I began our relationship, she was following this goddess path, and I was learning about it. And I also learned about the Egyptian deities, the male Egyptian deities, and the Egyptian god of writing and science and measurement is known as Thoth. So after about a year in our relationship had taken place, I asked her one night, am I Thoth enough? And she said, yes, you're Thoth enough.
And of course, Shashat is also said to be a consort of Thoth. That has still not been 100% proven to me because some call her his daughter, and some people affiliate him with Mot, who's the goddess of justice and truth, to couple them up without being 100% sure. So we'll have to see.
And also, early on in the relationship, we decided that she was emulating Lakshmi and I was emulating Vishnu. So she became Laurie Shmi and I became Bhikshnu.
Yes, yes.
Now, what inspired you to write Goddess in the Mirror?
Well, I had been working on so many different books about specific goddesses that I felt it was important to write a book that is not just about one goddess or a number of goddesses, but to look at the goddess as a universal force and a divine energy that is there for us, that is there to support us and partner with us. But also, I wanted to, again, revisit the idea of the goddess within, which is something that was a very big part of my first goddess book, which was, at the time, it was called A Goddess is a Girl's Best Friend.
And it's been republished as The Goddess Pages.
Yes, it's now called The Goddess Pages. So Goddess in the Mirror it started out as a follow-up to that book, but it's really a companion. It's just sort of something that you could look at on a daily basis for little bits of inspiration. And I also wanted to look a little more deeply at the emotional aspect of being in the world and trying to find our grounding and self-esteem, especially when things are chaotic and unclear. And there's certain people who, like me, are a little more sensitive than others. And I have had a lot of experience of feeling that my sensitive soul has been steamrolled by other people. And I discovered, especially through teaching in the goddess community the last year or so, that there are a lot of people who are really suffering from feeling like they can't get their grounding. They can't get their standing firm around people who are bullies or who are difficult. And I wanted to help them especially connect to that inner goddess, that inner light that is connected to the divine of all that is, and to really feel that power within.
Now, are there specific goddesses who are associated with mirrors?
Well, there are 4 goddesses in the book. They're also in my book, The Goddess Pages, but I kind of did a repeat with them. One of them is Venus, who is often, is pictured with a mirror in hand in some art. And she is a beauty goddess. And Oshun, who is a sensuality goddess in the Yoruban tradition, she is always pictured, or she is said to carry a mirror and to look at her own beauty. And Amaterasu, who is the Japanese goddess, is sometimes identified as a mirror. And she's a very important goddess in her tradition. And Hathor is a goddess of beauty and pleasure and of great importance in the Egyptian tradition. And I have a little mirror of Hathor that I got at the Brooklyn Museum about 20 years ago. And I was recently there and I saw the original. It doesn't have the glass in it anymore. But the women of ancient Egypt were able to appreciate their own beauty when they looked into a mirror that was basically formed as the body of Hathor. The handle represented the goddess, and then the mirror represented her moon held in horns, which is her headdress.
Of course, Medusa had a mirror, didn't she?
Well, you got me on that one.
Medusa is the one with the snakes in her hair, and anybody who looked upon her.
I know who she is. I just didn't realize about the mirror. But I was just starting to do some research about her because there was a huge statue of her outside the criminal court in downtown Brooklyn. And I went down there to take a look, and they have removed it, but it was very controversial because she was 7 feet tall and fully unclothed.
Was she fully snaked?
It was in her hair. It was a modern statue. But the thing is that she has been a very misunderstood goddess because she was raped, and she had a reason for being upset. And she was put in front of the criminal court because that's where they were trying the cases related to abuse of women in the Me Too movement. So that's why she was selected. So the goddess is not always seen, or her story is not always something that contains a pleasant tale of a beautiful goddess who, weaves magic across the land. Some goddesses have harsher stories and have darker personalities.
What is magical about the goddess mirror? What was the fallacy in Snow White of the evil queen chanting, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all"?
Well, I think people actually should do that and give themselves a good answer, because women tend to have challenges. This is a generalization, but women, people who identify as female, tend to have challenges looking in the mirror. They look for flaws. They look for things that are wrong. Sometimes we look and say, "Oh, I look beautiful." But a lot of times we look and we have this voice over our shoulder saying, "Oh my God, you're so fat. You're so skinny. You don't look good. Your skin is horrible. Your hair sucks." And we really should bless our mirrors. And that's really one of the things that I talk about in Goddess in the Mirror. Is the first thing you do is to bless the mirror and see yourself as a goddess in the mirror.
Tell us about the blessing. Is there a specific blessing you can share?
Awaken, open your spiritual eyes and see the truth of your existence. You are divine. You are the child of the goddess, and a goddess in your own right. It is your time to know your power and the magic of who you truly are. You are a goddess, and it is time for you to shine.
That's beautiful. When you do that for yourself personally, what do you see?
Oh, I'm going to share a story about Dr. Ruth a few decades ago when I first interviewed her. And I said to her, and her husband was in the room, and I said, this was when she was first becoming a big star. And I said, "Well, how's your own sex life?" And she said, in that accent, she said, "Well, the shoemaker's children never have shoes."
Of course, Laurie Sue is referring to Dr. Ruth Westheimer, who used to have a show about lovemaking.
Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth.
She's wonderful. I've known her now almost 40 years, I think, but I'm not that we're personal friends, but I have interviewed her and seen her. The thing is that I have my own issues with self-esteem, and I wrote a book about some of the things that helped me deal with some of those issues. But to be very, very honest, I have not healed myself. of my own issues. And I still am very challenged sometimes seeing my beauty and my power and my talent and the good things. And that's why you have to keep working with the mirror and keep working on your internal journey and keep, trying to change your vibration and also start retraining your brain on how to see yourself. So it works on a number of different levels.
Laurie Sue has a special mirror. It's called Victor Fuhrman. And every time I look upon her, I tell her how beautiful, how powerful, how brilliant, how amazing she is. And every word is the absolute truth.
And that is a beautiful blessing in my life. And you're a beautiful blessing in my life. And people, women, anybody has to feel it in their own heart. When you hear it from somebody else, it doesn't have as much of an impact if you can't agree with it inside. One of the things that was a motivator in doing this book also was I had a doctor more than 25 years ago. And that doctor saw me one time, the first time, and it was actually, I call the doctor a female in the book because I changed the identity, but it's actually a male doctor. And when I went to see him, he wrote me a note that said, "You're looking for love, and it starts with yourself." And that's how I started the book.
And that's the truth. My guest, my beloved Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway, her book is called Goddess in the Mirror, Learn to See Yourself Through the Eyes of Love. Laurie Sue, please tell our listeners where they can get the books and find out more about you.
My books are widely available on Amazon around the world, and you can look under Laurie Sue Brockway, and my website is revlauriesue.com.
And we'll be back with more of Laurie Sue after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can. But it's just as important to take time for yourself. AARP can help. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Look out, world, we're getting strong. The future's here and we belong. She can STEM, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Or clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can STEM, so can you. Find a cure, invent something new. There's no challenge in the world that she can't face. She can STEM.
Learn more at She Can STEM. A message brought to you by the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway, her new book, Goddess in the Mirror, Learn to See Yourself Through the Eyes of Love. Laurie Sue, when women look into the mirror on a daily basis, What do they see?
I think they mostly see, or they immediately see, some of their flaws or perceived flaws, or the things that they do not feel are beautiful or right about their face or hair or bodies. And I think we have been so trained to see beauty in a certain way that we have lost some of our ability to see the inner beauty and see what, the shine that comes up on your face when you see how beautiful you truly are.
This subjective perspective, have media and advertising done a lot to diminish women's self-esteem?
Yes, and social media. Social media studies are showing make people depressed, make people feel inferior. I should use the word makes. Social media also makes people feel very inferior and feel like they don't have the right look, they don't have the right life, they're not having the right experience, they're not doing the right things. It's really horrible because there's certain people who are able to go on social media and promote themselves and post photos of lives that are not the lifestyle that most people can follow. Some people are just really super physically gorgeous and they take 5 million selfies and just put out this image of the perfect body and face. And, the rest of us who are chubby or old or skinny or don't have the right job or don't have the right husband or boyfriend or who don't like their hair, who have issues with their own self-esteem, it's a trigger to see that. It's really a trigger.
Would you say that women in American society are programmed to live up to a full standard?
Well, yes. That's a very, very intense and deep and far-reaching topic. And basically, I really talked about this in the first Goddess book I did, A Goddess is a Girl's Best Friend, now called The Goddess Pages, that we are built up. Back then, it was Madison Avenue that told us how we should look and how we should dress and how we should talk and what we should look like. And, television told us what hairstyles to have and what kind of clothes we should wear. And there's a lot of models and people who model certain things that other people would like to have in their lives, who are out in the world just doing their thing, and people who don't have the same opportunity feel bad about themselves, and people who don't have the perfect body or the perfect face or the perfect teeth or the perfect liposuction begin to feel very bad about themselves because they can't measure up. This is especially with teenagers. It's really horrible what young girls go through, not just teenagers, but young girls. What they're led to believe is the ideal and what's really achievable are two very different things.
How does Goddess in the Mirror guide them into seeing themselves in a different light?
Well, the book aims to take them on a journey of different blessings and rituals and things to think about so that we put all the cards on the table. Like, here's something that's really hard for me to deal with. Here's something I'm struggling with about my body. Here's something I'm struggling with about my sexuality. Here's something that's really hard for me to do. And here's another thing that feels very difficult. Here's a relationship that's giving me trouble. It has like many, many chapters that address different issues that people are facing on a daily basis. And then we just go through a process, like how it makes us feel. And then we look at, well, what kind of blessing can we add in here? And every chapter starts with a goddess mirror wisdom blessing. and it ends with a self-blessing, a divine self-blessing in the mirror, so that people can really have the power to bless themselves, to feel the energy of the goddess running through them.
Please give us an example of some of the exercises you offer women in Goddess in the Mirror.
Every chapter is formatted so that it looks at things that are really important, like intuition. Every chapter has a self-reflection. Every chapter has a self-love suggestion. And every chapter has self-reflection and different ways to look at a particular situation. And, for example, you want to make peace with your inner critic, because that's the part of you that really sabotages your inner goddess. So the goddess mirror wisdom on that is you are a glorious being with a bright purpose in life. Don't be a slave to your inner critic. Set boundaries the way you would or should with anyone else who is impinging on your sanity and your personal space. If your critic is hard on you, always putting you down and making you second guess yourself, give it a piece of your mind. Tell your critic to back off.
That's wonderful advice. And also, really with the mirror, the concept of the mirror, when you look into the mirror, it's difficult to see the shadow, isn't it?
Well, actually, it could be opposite of that. It's when you look into the mirror, especially if you're somebody who's suffering from self-esteem issues, the first thing you see is the negativity. But if you keep looking deeply into your own eyes in the mirror, you can begin to get past that. And some of the things that will come up when you're learning how to do this is the shadow. You're going to see the things that make you feel that you are unworthy. You may see the things that make you feel lesser than. You may see the things that allow you to let other people sabotage you or use you, or that gets you into abusive situations. You may begin to see the things that happened in your life to set you on a path where you didn't think very highly of yourself. But then you keep working on it and acknowledging the shadows that come up, acknowledging that part of you that has been injured and has been wounded, and acknowledging. Soon you begin to see, if you start talking to other people, you see that you're not alone. There are other people who have the same wounds. And keep looking into your own eyes in the mirror until you get past the challenges and begin to see the depth of your soul in your own eyes.
You talked about women who have had critical mothers and hearing their voices and the reinforcement of the negativity when they look at themselves in the mirror. What about connecting to the Divine Mother? How may she help you?
I think the Divine Mother is everywhere. And that's why I don't think we have to name her by a certain aspect. If we look at life as a disco ball, then the disco ball is the Divine Mother, and the different facets are different facets of the divine, reflecting a different part of divinity and a different part of humanity, because divinity represents humanity. The divine wants to have a relationship with us, and we want to have a relationship with the divine. So we can connect in very simple ways, lighting a candle and sitting and looking at the flame. We could go into the backyard, as I do every day, and take our shoes off and stand on the grass if you have a patch of grass. You can feed the birds or feed the animals. You can go to a body of water. You can sit by the ocean. You can go to a lake. You can take a walk on a path that maybe has a forest or a mountain. There are many ways to connect without having to go to a temple or a church or a place that is typically someplace that the goddess resides, because she is every place. In fact, I just did a whole course on this for the Glastonbury Goddess Conference, which is coming up in July. The course is called How to Create a Relationship with the Goddess from Anywhere in the World, because people are gathering in Glastonbury to honor the Divine Mother and all divinity. And some people can't get there. So I did a class and a presentation for people who aren't able to actually travel there to tell them how to connect with the goddess in multiple ways without having to really leave home.
And how may people find out about that?
The website is goddessconference.com.
And this takes place in Glastonbury every year?
Yes.
And you also had a class for them last year, didn't you?
Yes. Last year, I taught the class on Shushat. It was called She Who Scrivens and Publishes, and I turned it all into a book.
That's wonderful. You know, one of your most recent aspirations has been working towards a master's degree in public history. Yes, she's well on, she's not old, but she has a lot of experience, but she's going for another degree in public history. This is really a time of reinvention for you. Why public history, and how will that apply to this study?
Well, I wanted to continue my study of goddess history, and goddess and both ancient and modern interpretations are so much a part of public history because they are in public statues, in public temples, Mary in churches and museums. And she's just all over the place, but nobody has really started to focus on, here's a bunch of goddesses in this museum. I mean, other people, I'm sure, are focused on it, but I have begun to study it in an academic way, and I'm really enjoying this path. I never got to finish my master's in marriage and family therapy. I'd gotten part of the way, and then my mom got really sick, and I had to give it up to take care of her. And Alexander still needed help, but my mother's caregiving just took everything out of me. And I went through a long period of my life where all I did was take care of people. And immediately after my mother passed away, 2 of my best friends died. And then 10 of my other dear friends died. And your mother died and your sister-in-law died. And then Abby's mom died. We had just one death after another. And I just could never get my footing. Everything was about funerals and caregiving for quite some time. And I finally, during the pandemic, I started to focus on self-care, and I took a priestess training. I took more than one training, and I also went for my master's in interfaith studies and then my doctor of ministry. And after doing all that studying, I also trained in Celtic hand fasting in Glastonbury, how to do it authentically. And I just did a lot of studying, and I'm just a lifelong learner. And I just really wanted to go back to school for this degree. I'm just having a great time because it's hard. It is harder than anything I could have imagined. My first semester was so hard, but it's also giving me a chance to really do work that's important to me.
For our listeners not familiar, what is public history?
Public history is really a study of history that's outside of the traditional academic setting or structure of history majors. It's a way of looking at history through the experience of what is in our public view and through movements and through social consciousness and through everything from understanding how museums are run, which is museology, to understanding why people are pulling down public statues.
So in essence, with public history, you'd be able to work in, if you chose to, or create your own museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the word museum starts with muse. And who are the muses?
Right. Goddesses.
Goddesses, absolutely. My guest, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway, will be back with more of Laurie Sue and her new book, Goddess in the Mirror, after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
And we're live here outside the Perez family home, just waiting for And there they go, almost on time this morning. Mom is coming out the front door strong with a double-arm kid carry. Looks like Dad has the bags. Daughter is bringing up the rear. Oh, but the diaper bag wasn't closed. Diapers and toys are everywhere. Ooh, but Mom has just nailed the perfect car seat buckle for the toddler. And now the eldest daughter, who looks to be about 9 or 10, has secured herself in the booster seat. Dad zips the bag closed, and they're off. But looks like Mom doesn't realize her coffee cup is still on the roof of the car. And there it goes. Oh, that's a shame. That mug was a fam favorite.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just nail the big stuff. Like making sure your kids are buckled correctly in the right seat for their age and size. Learn more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Visit nhtsa.gov/the
right seat. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Hey, son, how are you feeling?
I'm fine, Pops.
What's on your mind?
I can't explain it.
When your kid can't find the language, find the lyrics. Start a conversation at sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by Ad Council and Pivotal Ventures.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway, her new book, Goddess in the Mirror, Learn to See Yourself Through the Eyes of Love. So we concluded the last segment by talking about your pursuit of a master's degree in public history. You regularly take tours, some by foot and some virtually, of museums and sites that share statues and paintings of the feminine divine. What have you learned during these excursions?
I have been pretty excited to discover that when you look back into history, that the goddess really is part of it all. Being able to trace things by learning both the archaeological information and the history of different artifacts really gives you the sense of how religious history has changed over time. And we have gotten into the habit of calling goddesses part of mythology. And of course, every goddess has their own mythology, but in the culture of their time, they were goddesses worshipped like we worship God today. And they were divine figures who were honored and prayed to and sometimes appeased by the people and by the priestesses and the priests. It just really shows you the evolution of history and how there was a divine mother from the start. And it also, the other thing that I'm studying is the controversies and the disputes. One of the things that we learn in public history is everybody has a different interpretation of history and everybody has a different opinion. And my interpretation of history, looking at the divine feminine, is very different from the interpretation of history that someone who's a biblical scholar. So, but all interpretations are worthwhile and important. So by right now, I've been kind of staying local because I haven't been able to travel, but there are things planned in the future that give me a greater sense of experience in other places. But I think one of the other things I learned is that we grow in the space where we are planted, and some of us just never get to travel the world and have to find it through our own back door and area.
Tell us about your personal virtual exhibition and subject of a new book on Enheduanna, discovered in the archaeological dig of ancient Ur.
Actually, Enheduanna was the high priestess who was the world's first author, and she was the first hymnist to the goddess. Her work was happening about 4,000 years ago, and she was a very important religious and spiritual and political figure in ancient Ur. She was part of the temple. She helped run the temple in Ur, which is now modern Iraq, and Uruk. And she helped train priestesses, and she was an end priestess. So she was a higher rank, it was a rank that was often given to royalty. She was also a princess. Her father was Sargon the Great, and he was the first person to create a civilization. And of course, there was a lot of controversy and protecting of the turf. And there was a point where she was removed from her position, although her family took back the seat of power and she was reinstated, but she was heartbroken. And she, in her hymns to the goddess Inanna, she cried out, especially in her most famous work called The Exaltation of Inanna. She cried out and asked why Inanna was not helping her and asked for help. And she cried out to her spiritual husband, who was known as Nana, and also Sin, who was a moon god. And as a priestess, she was spiritually married to him. And she also treated gods and goddesses with equal fare, but she was particularly connected to Inanna, who was the ancient goddess of love and war, and in ancient Mesopotamia.
Now, from that area, there were other goddesses, including the goddess Ishtar. Tell us about Ishtar.
Well, Ishtar is an evolution of Inanna, because as history marched on, the same goddesses became different, known by different names. And the story of Ishtar is very similar to the story of Inanna. They both had consorts. Inanna's consort was Dumuzi, and in the form of Ishtar, he was called Tammuz. And there's a very famous story about how her lover partner was dragged into the underworld, and Ishtar, Inanna, and then later Ishtar had to go down 7 levels to take off different elements of clothing and jewelry, to be stripped bare, to face the hell, essentially the darkness. And she also, on this trip, met her twin sister, Erishkigal. And in doing that, she had to face her own shadow self. And she's one of the original goddesses worshipped in the earliest society, the earliest ancient society. And so her story is very important, and her stories become a very important part of the goddess community. And she is honored because of that. And of course, I learned about her from my own beloved priestess teacher, Annabelle de Boulay of the Avalon Rose Chapel in Glastonbury. And she is the first one who really led me on a journey to experience what it was like to go down those 7 levels and confront my own shadow and then become liberated on the way up. She's taken people on this journey many times where you actually have a physical, a spiritual, meditative experience. And it was really through through Annabelle's teachings and my experience with her that I really learned about Enheduanna. I had just heard about Enheduanna in passing, and I have to really credit Annabelle with teaching me more about her story and spirituality. And I was so taken by this priestess, who also was the world's first author, that I ended up doing this huge exhibition online, and it can be reached at enheduannaexhibition.com for school. It was my final project, and I got an A.
Absolutely wonderful. I witnessed Laurie Sue assembling this as she was putting it together. But you made a very valid point about this. She had to descend 7 levels. And with each level, she had to lose the accoutrements of life, the dress, the jewelry, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And then she's really stripped bare. That's really a rebirth process, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's something that I deal with a little bit in Goddess in the Mirror and probably all my works, where we have to sink into and acknowledge what is not working in life and the challenges and the shadows in order to move forward. And when we don't do that, we keep having the same problems over and over again. And I would never recommend that anybody do it only on their own. I think when somebody goes on a deep spiritual journey, they also need an emotional support system. They should have a group. They should have a therapist. And if they don't have a therapist, they should call, an emergency hotline that helps them deal with the emotional material that comes up even when you're on a spiritual journey, because it is not just one thing, it's everything. And the more you evolve spiritually, the more emotional growth you can have. Not everybody does that. Some people think it's just about spirit, but I don't think that's true. I think it's spirit. I think it's emotions. I think it's the brain. I think it is culture. I think it is the things that we expose ourselves to. In Goddess in the Mirror, I try to suggest a lot of different things that people can expose themselves to that move them in a positive direction.
Wonderful. Is it time for our culture to venerate once again the feminine divine and embrace their qualities?
Yes, I believe so. But there are a lot of people who would not have the same opinion, and I would never impress it on somebody who is not in that same place. I think everybody has their own way of connecting with divinity. I think any time we allow ourselves to embrace the divine, to work with the divine, to do better things on earth, that it's healthier for our planet. But my path as the goddess, she's been my path for a very long time. But when I was, all my years as a minister, it's been like 23 or 24 years now, I have always embraced every faith and every tradition and every path and honored every path that other people walk. And I would never say that goddess is the only way, because there are many ways to get to the same place, which is a connection with the divine. But if people feel called to the feminine divine, I think it is important that they know that she's there for us, and she's been there for us. And maybe she was written out of some of the books, and maybe she was taken out of chunks of history, and maybe other stories were written over hers, but she is there and available to us all.
Her book is called Goddess in the Mirror. Learn to see yourself through the eyes of love. And there's a beautiful picture of a winged goddess holding a mirror. Who is that, Laurie Sue?
She's just a beautiful mirror that my book designer turned into the cover that I wanted it to be.
And it's truly beautiful. Laurie Sue, please tell our listeners how they can get your book and other books and find out more about you and all of the wonderful work that you do.
Well, they can find my books on Amazon, and if they get one and they like it, I would so appreciate reviews, because it helps other people find the books. And they can find out about my work at revlauriesue.com.
She's my goddess. She's the love of my life. She's my soulmate, my twin flame soulmate. And I am so blessed that she and I connected 22 years ago and found our way into each other's hearts. Thank you, darling.
I love you.
I love you too. And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.